Sardinia, an ancient island, an amazing natural environment. Among its mountains, wounded by the flow of time and by the people, there are still surviving really gorgeous landscapes. In these places, cultural legacy and tradition are still passing nowadays as in the past by parents to children. These mountains, once disputed by shepherds' families to control the pasture, even today are the indisputable kingdom of the shepherds, keeper of the environment and of the millennial tradition of the Sardinian people. Proud people, strong folks who, in this harsh land, built their world, defended from the armies which came from the sea, and was this island they gave rise to one of the most beautiful expressions of European megalithic civilization, the Nuragich civilization, a population of shepherds and warriors, and also, according to the last studies, people of science. If it's true, as it seems, they built the Nuraghes not only as dwelling place, but also to read celestial events, which ruled life and death, which were herald of good or bad harvest. From that ancient time, not only some Nuraghes still exist in Sardinia, icons of the great Nuraghic civilization, but also the pinnetta, the shepherd's hut, built with stones and juniper branches, that was still in use until the last century, and in a few cases until today, and that came to us from the age of Nuraghes as many rites and tradition of the Sardinia agro-pastoral world. And it is on the mountains and in the valleys of this ancient island where shepherds breeded herds and made the most famous Sardinian cheeses. Flavors of Sardinia, sometimes hard and stingy land, but at the same time bountiful of taste and perfumes. A pure environment, the green heart of Sardinia, which reflects in the bright blue of its sea. Impervious paths crossed by transhumant herds, which leave the cold zone to get the warmer pastures in the lands near the coast, prepared to come back in the spring when the sun makes pastures colored and full of life on the mountain of Gennargentu. Ancient paths handed down habits ever since. An island rich in history and charm, the charm of culture and tradition of a people who have hospitality in his soul, knowledge and flavors handed down by generation, and that we can find in the essence of the enogastronomy in all the village throughout the island. Rites and handicraft, art and tradition of a people who is strictly tied to their land, people that from this land have got food, built their past, and on this land are designing their future. Aromas and taste of Sardinia, the flowers, the trees, the smell of thyme. The art of cheesemaking in Sardinia has an ancient history. Breeding products were the main source of livelihood of local people, and among them, cheese was the most important. Since the Punic era, historical documents tell us about a large amount of cheese made in Sardinia. This was particularly true in the Roman era. Cheese that was really appreciated in the overseas markets, especially with regards to the quantity of salt that was in it. Salt was rare, but in Sardinia, because of its sea salt production farms, was not. In the 18th century, a lot of authors wrote about the importance of sheep and goat farming in Sardinia and about cheese production. Even today, many shepherds make cheese in their sheepfold huts. When the milk slowly stirred gets the correct temperature, the rennet is added to the pot to coagulate the casein. The solid card will be cut with wood or iron tools, separated from the whey, and then put in cylindrical molds and pressed until the correct shape is formed. After some hour rest, the cheese will be immersed in brine to get the correct amount of salt and, at the end, will be left on a wooden shelf for ripening. Made from pasteurized milk, the Pecorino Sardo cheese is made in two different types: Pecorino Sardo Dolce and Pecorino Sardo Maturo. The Pecorino Sardo Dolce, mild Pecorino Sardo cheese, which is ripened for a short times, normally between 20 and 60 days, has semi-soft white or pale texture with delicate and aromatic taste. The Pecorino Sardo Maturo is seasoned for at least 4 months. It has an hard and compact texture with tiny holes and sharp and pleasant spicy taste. In the north of Sardinia, a different kind of pecorino cheese is produced. Named Pecorino di Osilo, it's protected by Slow Food Presidia project. It has a smaller shape than the Pecorino Sardo cheese and a semi-soft with pale yellow and pleasantly fatty texture. In the Gavois Barbagia territories, the shepherd made their cheese differently. They used to make it with raw milk, in order to produce a cheese with a white, compact, really hard texture and with characteristic flavors, thanks also to the smoking process that is a part of the Gavois cheesemaker's art. It has a characteristic black rind and a rather convex side. It is Fiore Sardo cheese, protected by the Stresa International Convention since 1951 and by European DOP label, which ensure that Fiore Sardo is produced in a specific geographical zone and according to tradition. A cheese that came to us from the most ancient tradition of Sardinian cheesemakers. It is the only Sardinian sheep's milk cheese made by raw milk. Strictly tied to the ancient goat breeding in the island is the production of goat cub rennet. It has been produced since very ancient time, leaving the milk to coagulate in abomasum, one of the 4 parts of ruminant's stomach, before the cub start to eat grass. Usually, the goat cub rennet, caglio di capretto in Italian language, is used to produce milk coagulation in the cheesemaking process, but sometimes, in some areas, it can be preserved whole, to eat as it is. Its flavors immediately bring to mind scents of Mediterranean bush, that is the main food for the goats. It has a soft texture and really spicy flavor. Another really peculiar cheese, which is produced illegally but is just part of the deepest traditions, is the famous rotten cheese, or cheese with worms, casu marzu in Sardinian language, that originates from pecorino cheese wheel, where the Philophila casei, a little fly, lay its eggs. Because of this, small white worms are born inside the cheese, and their digestive enzymes modify the cheese, turning the texture into a medium soft and really spicy one, with the powerful flowers of the Mediterranean bush. A really gorgeous cheese, not to everyone's taste, not easy to find, but that could be an amazing experience to anyone who is lucky enough to try it. The casu agedu cheese, in English literally vinegar cheese, but it's not made with vinegar, it's a sour and really fresh cheese. It is a really soft and lightly sour textured cheese that has a little rest in the whey, and depending on the geographical zone, it's called in Sardinian language casu agedu, fruge or frue. Sometimes it can be ripened and preserved in brine. In this case, it's called merca or casu e fitta. The texture is medium soft and salty, and usually it is eaten in soups. It is only in the end of the 19th century that the new cheesemaking technique were introduced. It was the cheesemakers that came to Sardinia from Rome, where there weren't enough sheepherds to sustain their needs, that brought to Sardinia the new industrial processes and started the Pecorino Romano cheese production. The Pecorino Romano cheese is also protected by DOP label. It is made from sheep's milk produced only in the traditional geographical zones Sardinia, Tuscany and Lazio. Nowadays, at least 95% of Pecorino Romano cheese is still produced in Sardinia, and it is the main cheese production in the island. The Pecorino Romano cheese wheels are very big and, depending on the cheesemakers, can weigh between 20 and 30 kilos. The texture is white or pale, compact and hard, salty and flavored. It is mainly used as a rasp cheese to season pasta or other recipes, but it is really good also as a table cheese. In the most impervious land of Sardinia, particularly in Gennargentu and Barbagia and in the mountains near Cagliari, people breed goats. Really rare abilities are needed by shepherds to breed goats. People told me that they must know all their goats, one by one. Because when the goats go to the pastures, the kids remain in the sheepfold, and when the goats return, the shepherd must give the kids to their mother, because the goats nurse only their own kids, and if kids can't find their mother, could risk starving. For a long time, goat milk wasn't really appreciated, but nowadays goat milk and goat cheeses are living a new popularity. In Sardinia, there are 3 types of goat cheeses: soft, semi-cooked, and raw cheeses. The raw goat's milk cheese is ripened for between 6 and 8 months. The semi-cooked goat cheese needs a longer seasoning, about 8 to 12 months. It has a compact and hard texture, flavorous, more delicate in the youngest cheeses, and strong and spicy in the aged ones. It is really good as a rasp cheese and as a table one. Last but not least, a cheese that is rightly included in the history of Sardinian cheeses. It is cheese made from a mix of ewe's and cow's milk. Produced by a cheesemaker near Cagliari, it is known as a classic striped mixed cheese due to scratches on the rind. When it has been seasoned for a long time, the texture is hard but it blends in the mouth, releasing unusual flavors of citrus and tropical fruit. Although less common than sheep breeding, in some areas of the island there are cow farms. People from Piedmont brought to the lands near Ozieri herds of alpine brown cattle. In the lands near Santo Lussurgio, cattle was brought over from Sicily, and this gave origin to the breeding of Sardo-Modicana cattle, and then to the production of some cow's milk cheeses. In Santo Lussurgio, the cheese is made from the milk of the Sardo-Modicana cattle. It is the Casizolu, a stretched card cheese protected by Slow Food Presidium project. This cheese production technique is passed from mother to daughter, and nowadays, as in the past, is still the women that make this local cheese. When the card is ready, it is manipulated until the cheese pasta is formed, and then left to repose 24 hours. The day after, the Casizolo production starts. The cheese pasta is cut and laid in a pot where some water was heated. When cheese pasta becomes elastic, it is manipulated and molded until the correct shape has been obtained. Then, the Casizolu rests in brine for some hours, and then hanged in a cellar for ripening. In the north of Sardinia, in Ozieri, the Swiss Gruyère cheese production process, imported by people from Piedmont in 19th century, together with brown alpine cow, gave origin to a peculiar cheese, the Graviera of Ozieri. It is now rightly considered a traditional cheese. Even if it was almost disappeared, in recent times, thanks to some cheesemakers and also to the town council, it once again became a must for gourmet that visit Ozieri. Due to reduction of sheep farming in some other Italian regions, Several cheeses that were traditionally produced elsewhere in south of Italy since the last century are now also made in Sardinia. Generically known as canestrati due to the habits to put the card in a rush basket, canestro in Italian language, they are mainly sold in the traditional production areas. The production of rush baskets for cheese making or family needs was one of the part of the cultural legacy that, in the past, every girl learned since she was a child, and that was passed from mother to daughter. Like a bread making and fabrics making, basket making is a piece of craftsmanship that originates in the ancient times and that was an important part of the wealth of knowledge of every agro-pastoral culture. But let's go back to talking about cheeses. The canestrati cheeses are made in various types, even if they are all rasp cheeses. The crotonese cheese is made in a little cheese wheel that weighs about 2 kilos. It's made using only goat kid rennet. The texture is white or pale, rich in flavors and slightly spicy. It is seasoned between 3 and 6 months. The wheel of Foggiano cheese is a bit larger. It is made using mixed rennet from sheep and goats. It's seasoned for between 4 and 6 months. Both produced using mixed rennet from goats and sheep, the calcagno bianco and the pepato cheeses are made in larger shapes. A whole wheel weighs about 15 kilos and is seasoned at least 6 months. The pepato cheese, that in Italian means with black pepper, is produced by putting black peppercorns in the card when it is laid in the baskets. Two kinds of cheeses deserve a mention: the newly introduced cheeses and innovative cheeses. Using and adapting production techniques from other countries, some cheesemakers have introduced in Sardinia, alongside to traditional cheeses, some new ones. The Ovin Fort, the Capri Blue and Brebbi Blue, one made from goat's milk and the other from ewe's milk, are all blue cheeses. They are all produced using the Penicillium roqueforti, noble mold used to make Roquefort in France, Stilton cheese in England, Gorgonzola in northern Italy, and some other cheeses around the globe. In Sardinia, this kind of production get particular characteristic due to breeding in the wild, which add particular flavors to the milk. Many cheesemakers make a bloomy rind cheese. Produced using a Penicillium candidum, these cheeses have a white and soft texture and edible rind. In Nulvi, a village in the north of Sardinia, some years ago a cheese factory started the production of some cheeses from ewe's milk that were traditionally made from cow's milk. The Gran Glona cheese, that looks like Parmesan but is made from ewe's milk, is a rasp and table cheese, with a pale and hard texture. The Regia de Casu is a ewe's milk cheese that looks like Swiss Emmental, yellow pale, medium hard and oiled texture. There is also the Anglona vegetale, made from used milk and produced by using vegetable rennet, for those who prefer, because of ethical or religious reason, to eat cheese without animal rennet. Another cheese that deserves a mention is one using production technique from Greece. A cheese like feta, but produced from Sardinia used milk. All these cheeses are demonstration of the verve of Sardinian cheesemaking industry, that, even if is strictly tied to a traditional production, is constantly looking for new processes and ideas. We cannot close without talking about ricotta cheese. Technically, it is not a cheese but a dairy product, because it is not produced from curd but from whey leftover from the production of other cheeses. Ricotta in Italian means re-cooked. It can be eaten as it is or used in many recipes, in particular cakes and sweet. Made from ewe's, goat's or cow's milk whey, there are different kinds of ricotta cheese. The fresh variant, white and softly textured, that should be eaten within 1 or 2 days. The ricotta salata, salty ricotta, that is salted, pressed, dried and seasoned for about 15 days, that could be used as a table cheese or a rasp cheese on various recipes, and the smoked ricotta. Traditional cheeses or new cheeses, all made in an island where today, as in the past, the earth grades in an uncontaminated natural environment, where the flavors of the Mediterranean bush are transferred to the milk and cheeses, where the art of cheesemaking is an important part of the culture of Sardinian people.